If you want stuff, this disembodied, disconnected, hyper-efficient, hyper-profitable system is perfect. If you want to live, this is death, because it is severing us from each other, from the earth, from ourselves even. And how do we remember our belonging to each other and to the earth? And that is more like a declaration of interdependence than a declaration of independence.
Welcome back to the AskNature Podcast. I'm Andrew Howley.
And I am Amanda Sturgeon. Andrew had a chance to sit down with the wonderful Baratunde Thurston to learn about his work in supporting us all to live well together.
Baratunde developed early digital content at The Onion, wrote the best-selling memoir How to Be Black, and hosted America Outdoors on PBS. On his podcast, How to Citizen, he covers topics such as democracy and civic responsibility. And on Life with Machines, he speaks and writes about the age of tech, the climate crisis, and more.
It's a conversation that covered our relationships to all of nature, including humans, and even bridged into AI. Enjoy.
So, Baratunde, thank you very much for joining us here for the Ask Nature podcast.
Thank you for having me.
One of the reasons that we're so excited to be talking to you is because of the very diverse approach that you have taken to exploring the world and our relationships with each other. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how those different lenses come together for you as different ways of understanding this world that we have.
Thank you. I think it's easy to see the differences in all those things. And certainly I have, and people who've tried to explain me are like, what's the through line? And the through line is how do we live well together? We is doing a lot of work. Live is doing a lot of work. And together, each of those. And I think there's an incompleteness to a balanced life if we're not in balanced relationship across those three dimensions on how we relate to the human and our peers and even ourselves, but also how do we live with our ultimate mother, our ultimate family member, this earth. And then there's these machines, they're coming, right? And not all of us asked for it, but everything we care about, every relationship we participate in will be mediated by, and at a minimum, heavily influenced by technology. That is no longer contained inside of a computer box in a room in the corner of your home or school or library. It's everywhere. So we got to be in right relationship across these dimensions, and living well with, living in relationship with, and living in balance with is, I think, the only way to create the future we want.
So what do you think is new about AI and the kind of the machines and world that we live in now? And what's really just the same perennial questions that we have about adapting to new technology?
Right. I mean, what's the same is moral panic has always accompanied the introduction of a new technology. The wheel, the printing press, the radio, the phonograph, the television, the telephone, books. There's been a great fear based on the disruption those things have, maybe based on the power that they would challenge. So whatever system holds power is generally skeptical in the kindest terms of new forms of power, especially new tools that distribute power in a wider fashion. So that's instinct, that's not evil. I think it's very natural, actually, to feel protective of what you have known. So that's not new. And so the AI fears are very consistent. What feels different is that this tool wants to build with you, right? It is the hammer that's going to tell you how to make the bench. And the hammer is like, hey, why don't I just make the bench for you? And that's different. That's really, to me, that's different. I'm not a deep historian of science, so someone could probably pick, even in the history, that there was that same kind of concern of loss of autonomy. But I'm fairly confident that we have not had technology that truly is being designed to be us. in so many different ways. There have been technologies that have tried to be us in a dimension of motion, right? In a particularly narrow operating fashion. But the creators of these tools and the chief salespeople of these tools have stated that their goal is to create technology capable of doing all economically valuable human work, to create artificial general intelligence indistinguishable from human intelligence. And that wasn't the goal of the hammer or the automobile or the steam engine, right? Wow. Those were very domain-specific technologies. This is a universal robot that folks are trying to create in direct contradiction and sort of cross purposes to how we've defined ourselves as people. And that feels wildly different to me. If you want stuff, this disembodied, disconnected, hyper-efficient, hyper-profitable system is perfect. If you want to live, this is death, because it is severing us from each other, from the earth, from ourselves even, and putting that all in a transactional model for every need to be met with a price.
What do you think? What is the possibilities? How could this go better?
There's so many ways. The most basic is people defining their own needs and declaring what they need for themselves and for each other, and working together to achieve it. Right now, we are in a reactive, sort of on the back foot situation where we're being flooded with solutions to undeclared needs. Like I didn't ask for a terrible version of me to write a worse version of a newsletter post. Like I didn't ask for that. I didn't ask for a shitty poet in a box. But that's what's coming. I didn't ask for zero cost, to me explicitly, deep fake capabilities. Literally no one asked for that. That was not on anybody's bingo card. It wasn't on a bucket list. There's so many petitions. We could look at change.org. We could scan social media. We could ask the kids and the elders. And nobody was like, you know what I want? To be unable to discern reality from fiction. But that's what we have an abundance of now. So just a reset of what drives it. I think a better world is one where the people themselves declare what they want and what they need. Mm-hmm. So how do we create technological experiences that bring us closer to the people we love, that give us more knowledge of self, that bring us closer into the natural world that we're a part of? We could build that kind of world. You're at the Biomimicry Institute. So what does nature have to say about some of this stuff? And is there a part of nature that's just trying to concentrate all the food, all the light, all the water, like all the resources? We do persist in greed, well outside of a natural balance. We ebb and we flow, and rivers do the same thing, and plants get diseases, right? There's no perfect state of health all the time. Mm-hmm. But there is a seeking of balance as a persistent, I think, inherent goal to living systems. And I think the human and the capitalist system we're in, we've got some different goals in mind that they pursue imbalance to an extraordinary degree, and pursue more without end, and we'll never be satisfied. It's like that Hamilton song. We're all Alexander Hamilton. We will never be satisfied. And that has some devastating consequences for
that's
us,
not news.
For the earth. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and that's not news. You go back to the oldest stories that we have recorded from cultures all around the world. There's always the stories of the king that goes too far, amasses too much power, too much wealth, and then is taken down a notch, or just finds that they have nothing, that they're still feeling empty. I mean, it's a really universal experience. So what do you see? You've met so many people and talked to so many people in different places through your podcasts and shows and everything. How do we get out of that, whatever system we're in, and we've just become drudgery? How do we find those moments of light that bring us into that fullness of life?
Ironically, that happens when things are the worst. When there's a disaster, there's a hurricane, there's a wildfire, there's a flood, all of that rat race goes out the window. And I heard Colette Pichon Battle speak about this. She's runs Taproot Earth in the Gulf South of the U.S. as a great civil rights leader, climate leader, Afro-Indigenous leader. She's a lot of things. And she describes, when the levees broke, nobody asked who you voted for. Mm-hmm. And the inherent neighborliness of the Gulf South shone through. Mm-hmm. And people got in their boats and went into the swamp and helped pull folks out. And they housed and quartered people who they didn't know, and they fed strangers. And you see it in the World Central Kitchens of the world, which is less about like an on-high rescue mission than a facilitation of local people rescuing each other and feeding each other in that case, and unlocking the inherent culinary capacity of an island struck by an earthquake or by war. So sometimes the darkest moments bring forth the light. That shouldn't be a requirement, but it is, a great catalyst. And it's not the only way forward. But when you mention these like resource hoarders of old with an E at the end, and this king, part of what forms of democracy are attempting to do is to create more of a balance and an ecosystemic view that all voices are heard, that all life is valued, and that you don't end up with the will of the few dominating the lives of the many. And that all the people have their needs met as well, or all life forms have their needs met as well. So I'm seeing versions of that with technology and democracy coming into combination. Look how divided we are. But what if you ask the questions differently? You could use the technology slightly differently, and you would discover unity. You would discover alignment. And then you could build from a different coalition base and show people how much we have in common, and then run on that platform, right?
Yeah. So a minute ago, you had said about people, and then you said, well, all living beings.
Yeah.
And that just makes me think of our citizenship, not just in our own cities and amongst our species, but amongst all species. We're citizens of Earth. How do we citizen as citizens of Earth?
So when I was making America Outdoors, I got to spend time with so many different types of people, indigenous people, hunters, athletes, activists, disabled folks, scientists. And I learned how much pride people have in place, not just in sort of social, political, or city-state, municipal place, right? Somebody might care about DC. I care about DC. I'm from DC. But to care about the Potomac River, or to care about the Blue Ridge Mountains, to care about Appalachia, not West Virginia and North Carolina and Maine and all these 14 states that comprise the Appalachian, but to care about the Appalachians, to care about Bar Harbor. But, we are connected to the land in a really like almost athletic, sports team kind of way. People like root for their forests and their valleys and their watersheds and certainly their rivers. But just being on so many rivers and mountaintops and deserts and salt flats with folks, it is so much more awe-inspiring and impressive to belong to those elements of nature than to belong to a made-up political economic zone defined by a meaningless border.
I know that's something that you really pull out in so much of what you think and talk about. And we see it in that story that, kind of America at its best is when it is so grounded in the interdependence of the people and the relationship to the land and everything. The best stories from that, the best moments come from that interdependence. And then connecting it to this idea of citizen as citizens of Earth and saying, what's that interdependence? What is that? Do we rise up to that? But how can we be that hand reaching out? How can we cultivate this interdependence for all of us?
It's the best option. It's the best path forward. There's many paths available. Well, a handful. And one of them is, hey, techno-fascism. Let's do that, right? We could do that. We're on that road, right? So we clearly are capable of making that choice, and we've made that choice in history before. More empire, more extraction. Not particularly innovative or novel, honestly. Or we could see this moment, this flood, this fire as a clearing, right? As a reset. And there's a lot of pain in that. There's tangible physical pain. There's loss of life, human and more than human. And there's clarity. After the fire, after the flood, what's going to grow? And I think we're in that moment. We're in the fire, but it won't burn forever. And so we have some choices to make now of what we want to grow on the other side of that, and how we're going to use that fertilizing, accelerating power that fire often brings to have a more beautiful forest emerge from that. How do we remember our belonging to each other and to the earth? And that is more like a declaration of interdependence than a declaration of independence. There's people all over the world working on interdependence. We're not like trademarking nothing here. But I think that will help keep us grounded in our humanity, because the seduction, the allure, the speed, and the overwhelm of just running the tech train will have us quadrupling down on independence in quite harmful ways, to us, to our relationships, to the earth herself. We shouldn't need a hurricane or a fire, but we're in a hurricane and a fire right now. So let's make the best of that. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, my fellow Earthling, and all the Earthlings who are tapped into this through your ears or your vibrational sensors or your infrared perceptory capabilities. You have a good rest of your day.
What a great conversation with Baratunde. What is staying with me is that we are in the fire. Looking from that perspective gives us the context to let go of control, something that Robin encouraged us to do in her conversation with me.
Yes, and so many of the themes we've been exploring will come back into play next week in the final episode of this, our inaugural season. I'll be talking with Gama Sibanda, one of the key figures in biomimicry in Africa, as he takes us from growing up in a rural village in Zimbabwe to putting biomimicry to work in complex engineering challenges around the world.
The AskNature Podcast is a project of the Biomimicry Institute. The podcast is hosted by me, Amanda Sturgeon, the Institute's CEO.
And by me, Andrew Howley, the Institute's chief editor. Our sound crew includes Lucas Murray and Simon Thomas George, who composed the music and sound design and mixed this episode. Audio production and story editing by Ayoade Balogun and Camilo Garzon. Executive production by Amanda, Camilo, and me. For more resources on biomimicry and regenerative design, visit us at AskNature.org. To connect with fellow listeners and other professionals in biomimicry and regenerative innovation, join our online community at AskNature.org/hive and enter podcast to receive 30% off your subscription. What will you ask nature next?